Today, climate change is a growing global concern, largely driven by increasing greenhouse gas emission. In response, reducing emission has become a key priority under international efforts such as the Paris Agreement. To achieve these targets, governments are moving beyond traditional regulation and are increasingly adopting economic-based policy tools. One important example is the cap and trade system, also known as an emission trading scheme, or ETS. This system places a cap on the total amount of emission allowed and creates a market where companies can buy and sell emission allowances. By assigning a price to carbon emission, firms are encouraged to consider environmental impacts in their financial and operational decisions. In this video, we will briefly introduce how the cap and trade system operates and why it has become an important policy tool in addressing greenhouse gas emission.
In the context of problem statement, first of all, despite growing global awareness of climate change and the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, many countries and industries continue to struggle with implementing effective and economically sustainable strategies. Traditional regulatory approaches such as emission limits and penalties often face challenges in enforcement efficiency and cost effectiveness, leading to uneven compliance and limited incentives for innovation. While the cap and trade system offers a market-based solution that encourages companies to reduce emissions through financial motivation, its real-world effectiveness depends on proper design, monitoring, and the willingness of firms to adapt their operational and investment strategies. Moreover, there is limited understanding of how such schemes influence corporate decision-making, investment in green technologies, and overall industry behavior in different economic contexts. This research seeks to address this gap by examining the operational dynamic of cap and trade, identifying the challenges in its implementations, and assessing its impact on fostering cost-efficient transition toward the low-carbon economy.
Moving on, we will move to the proposed solution, which is also entitled A Study of What Works. Quoting from the lessons learned from 3 decades of experience with cap and trade, published in the Chicago University Press, they wrote about the 6 key things that a proposed solution of a cap and trade bill must have. Firstly, the system must ascertain what it wanted to achieve and what scope it wanted to take. This could be seen in Reclaim and AB 32. In Reclaim, the proposed aim was to regulate the nitric dioxide emissions, and in AB 32 it was an all-out, across-the-board regulation of carbon emissions by cars, by factories, and by businesses. Secondly, the system must create the regulatory framework and enact regulations before it is implemented. This is seen with EP practices in all of its ETS systems. And thirdly, the system must have a central authority that have reserve quotas which it could sell or give when the prices are too high. This can be seen in EPA practices and state authorities such as California. The system must have ways of preventing hoarding. And this is exemplified in AB 32's 6 months reserve period for if the quotas or the reserved carbon emissions quotas have been in a 6 months high prices. The system must have ways of preventing hoarding, as I've said before. Fifthly, the system must apply both free quotas an auction which the independent authority sells. This can be seen in AB 32. And safely, the system must not allow trading between regions of high emissions to regions of low emissions. This can be seen by reclaim. That's all from me. Moving on to my partner, which would simulate how the system would work.
Okay, moving on to the simulation description for this project. So basically, the simulation of a national cap and trade system are designed to reduce greenhouse gas emission across multiple industries. So the system is based on a legal emission cap divided into allowances and some freely allocated to priority sectors and other will auction by an independent authority. So basically how the simulation works, each year firms are assigned emission quotas based on their activity. For the low emission firms that stay under their quota can sell or bank surplus allowances, while high emission firms on the other hand must buy extra permits or reduce emissions. Prices fluctuate with supply and demand but are managed by the government in order to prevent extreme volatility. So the simulation further includes regional trading restriction in order to prevent emission from concentrating in only one area. So the unused allowances expire to avoid stockpiling and fines apply to firms that violates the rule. So over the time, industries will adapt by either investing in clean technologies or relying on purchase permits. So what are the outcomes? So the outcome is the revenue from auctions is reinvested in green infrastructure, creating a feedback loop that supports further emission reductions. So the simulation also will track total emissions, economic efficiency, market behavior, and also corporate responses to assess the system effectiveness in driving low carbon economy. So in short, this simulation demonstrates how cap and trade can encourage companies to innovate, reduce emission costs effectively, and to support sustainable environmental policy.
Next is leadership reflection. The implementation of cap and trade system really needs strong leadership to be successful. Government leaders must be committed for the long term, be consistent in their policies, and be transparent. This is important so that industries, investors, and the public can trust the system. Leaders also need to stay firm and not to give in to short-term political pressure that may affect environmental goals. Cap and trade also shows how leadership plays a role in creating sustainable change. Leaders must balance environmental responsibility with economic competitiveness. This can be done by setting clear emission caps, managing the system properly, and making sure the rules are fair for everyone. Instead of focusing only on short-term profits, leaders should encourage innovation and investment in green technology to support long-term sustainability. Another important part of leadership is collaboration. Leaders need to work closely with policymakers, companies, and investors so that the system runs smoothly and efficiently. When all stakeholders cooperate, the cap and trade system can function better and achieve its purpose of reducing emissions. Communication and education are also very important. Leaders must explain clearly how the cap and trade system works and why it is beneficial. This helps reduce misunderstanding, resistance from industries, and fear of market volatility. When people around understand the system, they are more likely to support it. Lastly, from our group work experience, we learned that leadership also involves teamwork. Clear communication between group members is important to complete tasks on time and avoid confusion. This reflects how leadership and communication are essential both in policy implementation and teamwork. Okay, so for my conclusion, cap and trade is actually a useful tool to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but only if it is designed properly. Compared to strict rules, this system is more flexible because companies can choose how they want to reduce pollution in the cheapest way. However, this system is not perfect. Without strong rules,
proper monitoring and price control, companies may try to take advantage of it. Past examples shows that if the government does not control allowance, hoarding or enforce penalties, the system will not work well. So, my recommendation is that governments should create a clear long-term plan for reducing emissions. There should be a mix of tree and auction allowance, and the system must be managed by strong leadership. The money collected from selling allowance should also be used for green projects. In conclusion, if cap and trade is implemented correctly, it can help protect the environment without harming economic growth.